I'd like to welcome all of you to How Do I Ally? A Guide to Improving Diversity in Tech. For those of you who don't already know me, I'll start there. I moved from Juneau, Alaska to Bozeman to attend school and to ski. Unfortunately, I haven't had to leave yet. I interned at both Right Now Technologies and SRI International before I graduated with my CS degree in 2012, and I've been with Workiva ever since. I've worked on several projects at Workiva, which has been super awesome. Right now, I'm a senior software engineer doing front-end web development. When I'm not working, I'm probably running, traveling for running, or working on a baking blog. Why am I here? During the 5 years I was at MSU, there were 0 female faculty members and around 10 or 12% female students. It's closer to 15% now, which is not that awesome, but there are female faculty, which is amazing. Until my junior year, when I interned at Right Now Technologies, I had never met a female professional in the industry at all, and it was rare that I even heard any mentioned beyond like the huge big name ones, like Ada Lovelace. With the exception of a few months, I have been the only female engineer on my team in Bozeman, and the only female at all for about the last year. Industry standard is around 25%, but anecdotally, I see even like maybe half of that in most of the companies in Montana and Bozeman specifically. And lastly, diversity has really grown as a passion of mine over the last couple of years, and I'm super excited to raise awareness and hopefully support in the rest of the Montana tech scene. Start a little bit at the beginning, women in computing history. Over the last couple of hundred years, women have been all over computing history, although largely forgotten. I think most people are aware of Ada Lovelace being credited with writing the first computer algorithm. In the late 1800s through World War II, women were the computers. I recently read a book about Elizabeth Friedman, who pioneered modern cryptography during both World Wars and Prohibition. She was tasked with decrypting radio message from smugglers, which was pretty cool. It's also a fascinating book, so you should definitely read about her. Margaret Hamilton led and developed the in-flight software for the Apollo 11 mission. Dorothy Vaughan, who was one of the protagonists in the recent film Hidden Figures, learned and taught Fortran to a group of ladies at Langley Research Center. And Mary Shaw was the first woman to receive a PhD in computer science from Carnegie Mellon in 1972. However, fast forwarding a couple of decades, most people have never heard of most of these women or the multitude of others that I didn't have a chance to mention. Unflattering stereotypes are propagated throughout American culture, specifically in the media, which doesn't really entice anyone outside of that very narrow window into joining. Ultimately, the percentage of female graduates has been dropping since the 1980s, and the percentage of female computing professionals has been dropping since the early 90s. Furthermore, over 40% of females leave their jobs during the mid-career compared to just 17% males. And of those 40% that leave, half of those leave the industry entirely and abandon their tech training. In summation, women are less likely to start in tech and more likely to leave. But why should you care? Inclusivity is great for everybody. It allows you to bring your whole self to work, which allows you to give your whole self and 100% of what you have to give to solving the current problems. It results in happier and more productive employees, which everyone wants to be happier and more productive, pretty sure. And ultimately, higher job satisfaction and better collaboration with teams. Each of us has something to learn, and each of us has something to teach, and the greater the diversity of the people you have around you, the more you have to gain from each of them. From a team perspective, more perspectives from each member bring more solutions to solving complex problems. It results in better and faster decisions with less groupthink, and a more cohesive team where all of the different niches are filled. For the bottom line, which businesses are usually about, those in the top quartile for gender and ethnic diversity are more likely to have returns above their industry median, and firms with inclusive practices can generate up to 30% more revenue per employee than their competitors without. Presuming you're convinced, here's how to help find them. Recruit mindfully. This is mostly about career fairs. Remember that all students are potential hires, even if they are not ready quite yet. Freshmen and sophomores are often required to attend career fairs to get practice in the lay of the land, especially from their very low-level professors. So take the time to talk to them, because in 2 years, they could be the best candidate you have ever seen, even if they're not ready for you yet. You will attract the people to whom you advertise. So talk about your core values, not just the perks, and talk about what it's like to work at your company, not just to play there. If you are only talking about things like the beer fridges and the rec centers, you're going to attract people who care about beer fridges and rec centers. And all of those things are great, and we like to have them in our industry, but they are not the things you are actually hiring for. Talk about your collaborative work environments, your flexibility in schedules, any learning opportunities, how you can move up the ladder or laterally within the company. These are the things that are really going to bring in the people that bring something to the work you are doing, not just to your play. If you can, have a diverse set of representatives. If you are already shy, which, let's face it, most people in the CS department are not that great at talking to people. If you are approaching a trio of white males in their 30s and you are none of those things, it makes it 10 times harder to go up to that booth. The more diverse your set of people representing you, the more diverse the candidates you will bring in. Treat side projects and school projects with the same level of respect. There's an expectation in the engineering industry specifically that excellence programmers are doing things on the side. And while I don't think that is false, I think there are many excellent programmers that do things on the side. It should not be a requirement. When you are talking to someone about what they're doing, you're trying to glean whether they are passionate, whether they can learn on their own, and whether they can go the extra mile, and ideally, they can actually finish something. You can get that just as easily from a well-done school project as you can from a side project. Be proactive at pulling in candidates. Over the last 5 to 10 years, the Montana tech scene has grown ridiculously, and there are so many different companies at career fairs, it's very easy for people to walk right on by, especially with the smaller new ones. If you see a name tag with the right major, stop them, don't wait for them to come to you. Find new pipelines. If your main pipeline is a university with 15% females, you're gonna struggle to hire much more than that. You have to look outside of your current box in order to grow that box. Look for other places like code schools, which statistically have much better diversity than traditional universities, as well as meetups, women's networking events, and more specifically, any women's groups within the university itself. Lastly, mind your language on job ads. On average, women will not apply for a job unless they meet nearly or all of the qualifications that are listed on the application, whereas men will apply with as low as 20% or at least 50%, depending on which particular study you're looking at. Ensure you're not putting superfluous things on there, and be very, very clear about the difference between a requirement and a nice to have. And if it's nice to have, maybe just don't even put it on there. They can learn it. On top of that, be careful of the adjectives and adverbs that you're using. In English, most words are coded either masculine or feminine, and women will not apply for jobs that are coded with masculine language. This is not, conscious. We're not like, nope, that's a boy job, not doing it. But it's there, it's subconsciously we're much less likely to apply. There's a great program called TextData that allows you to upload your job applications in any other language you have for bringing in candidates, and it'll help highlight things that you can change to make it much more inclusive. Specifically, Atlassian did this, and they changed the proportion of women coming into their engineering from 10% to 57%, which is, I can't even fathom what that must be like. Step 2, hopefully hiring them. Now that you've found your candidates, make sure you are screening them openly. Start early. The best candidates, especially with students lining up internships for the summer, are going not only to have their shit together, but they're also going to have the most offers. The earlier you start, the more likely you are to be able to get those particular students. They aren't going to be waiting around for you to contact them, probably, unless you're super awesome. Do blind resume reviews and ultimately blind code reviews if you can. Blanking out names helps mitigate a lot of the unconscious biases that can happen early on in processes. It's well established that white male names receive many more callbacks than female names or those associated with people of color, or heaven forbid, both. And so blanking them out removes as much of that as possible from the process. Set clear expectations with both your hiring team and the people you are trying to hire. Make sure everybody is on the same page as what the job is, what the job requires, and what a top candidate actually looks like, as well as what the timeline for that candidate is. Workiva specifically has a bit of an issue where the tech career fair is a month before the MSU career fair, so making sure that tech students know they might have to wait a month to really be all the way through the process lets them decide if that's right for them. Look for yeses, not nos. It's very easy to screen someone out, but look for the reason to give them a chance in the first place. Look for the thing that they're gonna bring to the table, whether it's a new experience, a different job vision, a different background, new technical skills that your team could really use. Look for the reason to give someone a chance to be in your process in order to show that they are an amazing candidate. And lastly, share the questions both audibly and visually. During tech screens, it can be tempting to only share things over the phone, see if they ask questions and take notes and that kind of stuff. But sharing them visually allows candidates to work past any language barriers, accent problems, audio flaws, or just a preference for visual understanding. Once you've screened them, make sure you are interviewing inclusively. Just as much as it is important at a career fair to have a diverse set of representatives, ensure that you have a diverse set of people doing the interview. The more diverse your interview team, the more comfortable a diverse candidate will be during the process, and it'll give them that much better of a chance to show that they are the best person for the job. Be a welcoming office, particularly important with very small offices, especially the new ones, especially if you're hiring your first anything. Make sure that when a candidate walks in, people are acknowledging that they're there. A smile or a nod can go a long way in showing that not only are you aware that they exist as a human, but that they'll be welcome into your office should they decide to actually accept a position there. Ask the same questions to every candidate. This not only allows you to rank candidates more objectively, that is the word, between a large group of people, which is often the case when you're hiring interns. But also, it helps you establish a baseline for what to expect going forward, for what a candidate looks like during the interview process that will turn out to be amazing 6 months down the line. During the interview, do not rely on your memory. Memories are terrible. Take thorough notes, avoid using a laptop to mitigate the barrier between you and the candidate. And this will help you remember objectively how they did during the interview technically, not just how you felt about it later. It can be very easy to think of someone that was easy to talk to, that you got along with, that you had a lot in common with, as being confident, but being charismatic is not the same thing. Those notes you took earlier will help you better tell the candidates that actually objectively did well technically, not just you thought were a fun person. Look for someone that is going to add to your culture, not just fit into it. Fitting in drives toward homogeny, culture add drives towards diversity. It's very easy to look for the people that are already like everyone else in your company, but what you really need are people that are going to bring in something new. Obviously, you still want people that are going to jive with the general culture of your company, but you also want someone that's going to add a new perspective, bring a new background, or add new technical capabilities to your teams. Lastly, follow your pipeline from start to finish. You should have roughly the same number, percentage-wise, of diverse candidates at every stage of your process, and checking to see that that remains roughly constant will help you identify any bottlenecks or very obvious process problems along the way. This is the easiest way to check for if you have any low-hanging fruit, so to speak, to improve your numbers at a very obvious place in the pipeline. So if you are not bringing in the same number of candidates, interviewing the same number of candidates, hiring the same number of candidates, etc., figure out where the bottleneck happens to be. Once you have hired them, how do you keep them around? Support your coworkers. This is especially important when you are starting off in your diversity journey and perhaps you don't have a very diverse office at the beginning. But setting a baseline for an open door policy very early helps the candidates know that if there are any challenges that they are facing, they can bring them to you or your team. Being upfront with your inherent lack of understanding for how their challenges might be different makes it easier for them to come to you with those problems, even though they know you can't directly relate, they know that you care about it. If you can, it can also be really helpful to give them an avenue for someone else to talk to within the company. So if you have other offices that, for example, do have a female engineer, try to connect them and give them that path for communication. Ask that female engineer first. If a diverse coworker or someone you manage especially comes to you and says something is difficult, they're correct. You don't get to decide that that's wrong. If they feel isolated or something is challenging, just acknowledge that you understand that their day-to-day work environment is inherently different than yours. Just having that appreciation for the differences can make it much easier to face and ultimately fix going forward. Proactively welcome new team members. If your team has always gone somewhere after work and you have a new person or an old person that never joins in that particular adventure, you don't have to stop. Make sure you're doing other activities that include those people. You don't have to do everything all the time that each person is comfortable with, but make sure you're not isolating the same person or set of people every single time. And if you end up discussing work at these things, which we're all very likely to do, bring back any decisions or discussion items or just like main goals that came out of that back to the people who weren't there so they're not missing out on the work aspect too. Lastly, as I say city so delightfully it does for me, remember an individual is not their group. Regardless of, the female engineer you knew in the past or whatever, whether they were amazing or awesome does not predict how the one in front of you is going to do, and having that pressure of representing your entire gender is unawesome, and you should not put that up upon anybody. In addition, challenge your teams. Establishing a policy of not interrupting allows everyone to speak fully and freely during meetings without fear of not being able to finish their thoughts. When you already feel isolated or othered in a group, it's extra challenging to even start to speak, and if you get interrupted, it puts you 10 steps back from ever trying again. This also helps the people that are just inherently quiet or introverted or less likely to speak, so it could be great for more members of your team as well. Mind your language, not swear words. You should probably mind those too, but even inadvertently using gendered language can be extremely isolating if you are not associated with that group. If you were truly using "thanks guys" as a gender neutral term, you wouldn't feel the need to append "and lady" at the end of it. As mentioned, reach out to the whole team for opinions and ideas. If you have some quieter members or someone very much outside the rest of the group, doing this anonymously or in one-on-one meetings can help alleviate any pressure that they might feel about ruining things for the rest of the team. Lastly, let people know if they can improve. Everybody makes mistakes. Literally, I've walked into rooms that were 100% female and said, "Hey guys." So that's a thing. But make sure everyone is aware of it. If someone is telling off-color jokes or just accidentally isolating members of your team, you can be the one to help support them and show them how they can be better in the future. You don't have to publicly shame them right there in front of everybody, but a quick message or a pull to the side later can help everyone to know how they can be better in the future. If you are not speaking or acting against the problem, you cannot be part of the solution. Remember that solving this is a group effort and requires help from everybody. There can be a fear of white knighting or overstepping your boundaries, but changing a culture cannot happen with a single person. Acknowledge there's a problem. Hopefully by being here, you've already done that. So congrats, you're well on your way. Do some reading on unconscious bias. We all have them, and we can all do better at mitigating what they are. Investigate your current processes and see if there's anything really obvious and easy that you can change. Doing blind resume reviews, for example, takes about 10 minutes extra work and can solve a lot of problems. Find your current numbers so you can know if you are improving later. Establishing where you are not only shows you how much you might have to improve, which can be a bit eye-opening for a lot of people, but it can also show in 6 months if anything you're doing is actually helping it. And lastly, ask your fellow coworkers what their experiences are like. If you have someone that's way outside your team, see if there's anything your team can do to help make their environment better. Maybe don't just approach them out of the blue, give them a little time to think about it, but chances are there's something that your team could do to help them feel a little bit less isolated in the day-to-day. If you want to see change, you have to make changes. You can't use the same processes and expect different candidates. You can't use the same pipelines and expect different candidates. If you're interested in learning more, there's tons and tons of stuff that I could have gone into. One of my favorites is the diversity iceberg. There are many more things besides race, gender, ethnicity that are about diversity, although those are the main ones that are talked about. NC WIT has a great report on the current facts of women in tech, which is where I got a lot of my numbers from my earlier slides. Again, read about unconscious biases. Again, we all have them, they are there, and there are things you can do to help improve them. You can read about some of the inherent advantages you might have as a majority member of the computer tech industry, as well as reading firsthand experiences from the other side on how their environment is so much different than yours might be. And lastly, you can always reach out to me with anything at any time. If you are interested, you will do what is convenient, but if you are committed, you will do what it takes. I hope you're all committed. Thanks so much for coming, and I'm happy to answer